strong early warning system at European level, managed by the EU Agency on Drugs, which allows to rapidly share information and alerts on the new substances appearing on the market. And last but not least, an historically widespread availability of risk and harm reduction policy for people who use drugs.
Angela, what kind of problems are you seeing in your state or in the US?
Well, the United States has a major public health drug crisis on its hands. We lost 112,000 people in the last 12-month reporting period to the Center for Disease Control. That's 307 people every day, and most of those are being fueled by fentanyl, about 80%. So many people don't know that the illicit drugs that they're using have fentanyl in them. It's my understanding that it's not as permeant throughout Europe at this point, and that really stems from the demand that happened in the opioid crisis that was caused by the overprescribing of OxyContin. You may have heard about that in the lawsuits. You may have seen television programs, documentaries outlining what happened. But so many people got addicted through the 90s and early 2000s. It created a huge demand when the government started cracking down on that for illicit drugs. And we saw a flood of heroin into this country. Now it's fentanyl because it is so cheap to make for the dealers, and there's such a huge profit margin. And we are looking at many different ways to solve this crisis through legislation, through sanctions. There's a new act before Congress right now. But the main issue we feel at Emily's Hope is demand, that we have to really educate people and lessen the demand.
Laura, is drug addiction viewed as an issue of criminality or health?
I think it's perceived as both. What we really are trying to do within the European Union is what we call this holistic and balanced approach to address the drug problem based on scientific evidence. And we now know what works in prevention. We have a lot of evidence showing that life skills programs are very effective to reduce the entering into consumption. Then the second way is offering a wide range of treatment and care possibilities for those in need. Then we certainly have a widely accepted concept in Europe that is harm and risk reduction for people who use drugs. This means, for example, the provision of sterile equipment or the medicinal treatment like methadone, so what is called opioid agonist treatment. They have been effective for many years in preventing overdoses mortality. So support for users in accessing care, rights, housing, professional integration, etc. And in France, it's a very long-standing practice. Harm reduction policy exists since the 90s because we were facing a huge epidemics in HIV/AIDS, and now it is enshrined in law since many years, and it's anonymous and free of charge. Then certainly law enforcement plays a huge role as well. The main mobile for people, for drug traffickers introducing these drugs is money. So we know what works here as well, like asset confiscation, criminal investigation, international cooperation, sharing of intelligence.
Yeah, in the US, Angela, would you say drug addiction is perceived more as a criminal issue or as a health issue?
It is definitely perceived more as a criminal action. It's seen as a character flaw or a moral weakness. And we are trying to educate people that this addiction, substance use disorder, is a disease of the brain. And that once people become addicted to these substances, which is very easy to do after just a use or two, especially if fentanyl is involved, and they live, it's just very frustrating in this country how difficult it is to get people into treatment. I've traveled extensively, been to Scandinavia and throughout Europe, and I've seen some of the harm reduction things that have been in place for many, many years. We're not doing that here in this country. We're really politically divided about that as well. It's considered a liberal left-wing thing to want to do needle exchanges and things like that. I think we really started to come around in this country when it comes to the distribution of naloxone and also fentanyl testing strips. In fact, it's a state-by-state issue for legalization of fentanyl testing strips because they were considered drug paraphernalia. I lobbied for that and we just passed to make them legal in our state. Access to treatment is very difficult. It can be expensive. Emily's Hope gives treatment scholarships, but we can only do so much. And so often, even within the medical system, people suffering from substance use disorder are stigmatized. I know that my daughter was. It's a real uphill battle to shift the perception of this as a medical condition and as a public health crisis over arresting our way out of it. And I think we're starting to see a shift, but I think it's just starting to happen. I'm hopeful that it will be a very rapid change as more and more young people die. It's the leading cause of death among people 18 to 45 in this nation.
Angela, I mentioned at the start of the program that your daughter sadly died of fentanyl poisoning. I think I see a picture of her in the background in your living room. Would you like to tell us a bit about Emily?
Emily was 21 years old when she died of fentanyl poisoning, and that was in 2018. Emily was my oldest child. I have 4 children, and she was amazing. I mean, she was beautiful. She was gifted intellectually and artistically, and I never could have imagined this could happen. People who come from disadvantaged homes, and she had all the advantages in the world. She met a boy at age 16 who was dealing marijuana. She was with him up until a few weeks before her death, and it just escalated from there. I dealt with a lot of issues through her teenage years, but a lot of people are rebellious teenagers. I kept hearing that she was going to be fine, she's going to come out okay, but nobody was factoring in fentanyl. And also, we didn't know the extent of her use. We were 3 days away from holding an intervention because we knew at that point something was terribly wrong. We were going to get her into treatment, and she died 3 days before that. So it was devastating, and it's why I do what I do, because I don't want to see this happen to any other family. I know that pain and anguish, and to lose a child to a stigmatized death, and I miss my daughter every day. I'm fortunate to have a loving family, to have a husband and other children, but I know what it's like, and I just don't want to see any other mother, especially, I always say mother, but of course, any family member go through something like this.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, Angela. That must have been incredibly hard, but what you're doing through Emily's Hope is quite heroic.
Thank you for that. It's very tough, but I'm just trying, to do what I can. But thank you.
My deepest sympathy really to Angela, and I'm really sure that your courage and determination is helping so many other people. And I think all those who works at policy making level should listen to your story, to understand the path of Emily, and to do whatever we can to avoid this situation.
Thank you. Laura, how did you decide to focus on combating the trade in illicit drugs and the dangers or impact of them?
My story is quite different in the sense that I was born in Italy. I've studied contemporary history, and for me it was very natural to engage in the European project. When I was in school in Italy in 1992, there were 2 famous magistrates, Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, who were leading the fight against mafia, which was really very much connected to drugs trafficking. They were assassinated, and it was a shock for the country. And in the 90s, the European Union accelerated the police and judicial cooperation to tackle cross-border crime and to build the so-called European space of freedom, security and justice. So at the end of my studies, I decided to write a thesis on the role of the EU in the fight against organized crime. And just after, I had the chance to start working for the European institutions.
Educating young people about drugs is also really important, and I know it's really important for both of you. Angela, I'd like you to explain why this is so key.
Research shows that early childhood intervention, early childhood education is most effective in preventing substance use in the early to later teen years. So what we've done at Emily's Hope is this country is severely lacking any kind of substance use prevention education for the elementary school level. What we did in this country is we tried to scare kids from using drugs. But what we're doing at Emily's Hope is we've designed this prevention, substance use prevention curriculum, and I had a number of experts come alongside me, and it's just very informative for children on how to protect their bodies and their brains, and it teaches them what substances do to the brain, how they hijack the brain, and it teaches them what they do to their bodies and the different systems in their bodies in a way that I think every kid wants to stay healthy. Every kid wants to be, out there running and playing and doing things that they want to do. And so it's been very effective so far. We're in our second year. We have it now before almost 6,000 students in 4 different states. And we hope as time goes by to see that that makes a huge difference.
And what about you, Laura? Why do you think educating young people is so important?
Yeah, it is crucial actually, and I totally agree with Angela. So what we know now that works is from the early childhood to the adolescence, developing life skills to reduce risky behaviors, to enable children and adolescents to learn specific skills such as confidence, self-esteem, critical thinking, emotional control, or empathy. And these abilities actually allow them to better respond to peer pressure when they are offered drugs, for example, or when they are confronted with a possible risky behavior. And actually, this shows that, at least in France, there are some good news in this. Since some years now, we are observing a steady decrease in consumptions of all psychoactive substances among adolescents. We have very robust studies that are showing this regarding the use of cannabis. Regular use has dropped like half in 5 or 4 years. So we really believe that by reinforcing life skills and psychosocial competencies for children and adolescents, we are also really doing something good for prevention in general, and the results are there. Of course, we have not solved the problem, but I think science is there as well to show what works, and we can build evidence-based programs with some good results.
You're listening to The Conversation, and my guests today are Angela Kennedy, a journalist and podcaster who founded Emily's Hope, a non-profit organization to raise awareness in the opioid crisis and end the stigma of addiction. And my second guest is Laura Darrigo, a diplomatic advisor at the French Interministerial Mission on Combating Drugs and Addictive Behaviors. Angela, I'm wondering what ways drug issues and illicit drug dependence impact women differently?
Definitely consumption among women in the United States of illicit drugs is less than men, and the deaths are higher for men than women, although it's beginning to equal out. However, alcohol consumption among women has increased so much to the point that they're drinking as much as men, and we're seeing the health effects of that in the United States. Liver issues, premature death, all of those kinds of things.
Laura, is that something you've seen too?
Yes, definitely. Alcohol is certainly an issue, as Angela rightly pointed out. There is also the issue, to come back to what you were saying before, considering stigma, because women who use drugs are more likely to experience stigma than men, because I think they are perceived as contravening their current or future roles as mothers. So women who use drugs can also face heavier socio-economic burdens because they tend to have lower employment and income levels. And then definitely women who inject drugs have specific vulnerabilities to blood-borne viral infection because they are more likely to share injecting equipment. They are also more likely to report trading sex for drugs or money, so many have experienced sexual or physical abuse and have post-traumatic stress disorders. But then again, in addition to stigma, shame and guilt, women with children who use drugs may also fear having their children taken away. So pregnancy and motherhood can be both a strong motivation for, but also a barrier to recovery. So this is why we strongly recommend in general to reinforce access to the facilities in terms of opening hours, in terms of transportation service, to ensure that women can also go in these facilities with children and that they are taken care of. Providing services to pregnant and parenting women can certainly benefit both the mother and the child.
I would agree with Laura, and I think this problem is the same. They're stigmatized in the United States as well, more so than men, and also often become victims of human and sex trafficking because drugs are used as a way to lure them in and then keep them trapped in that situation.
Both of you are keen to reduce the stigma around the drug addiction. You have mentioned it throughout the interview. And Angela, I wonder how important is the language we use in this respect?
So important. The language is so important. To call someone a junkie, which is very common. After I went public with my daughter's story, lots of people on the internet called her a junkie and basically said she didn't matter. No one is a junkie. You know, there's someone who suffers from substance use disorder, and even some terms like clean